From the outside, Mount Vernon Baptist Church was the pride of the county. Run for 3 generations by the Vance family, it was a staple of the community. Pastor Ezekiel Vance delivered fiery Sunday sermons, his wife Clara organized the food drives, and their son Julian managed the church's extensive real estate and financial books. They were seen as pillars of holiness. But behind the heavy altar and beneath the floorboards, the Vance family business was far from holy. Every Thursday night after the evening prayer group departed, the holy house transformed. Julian would unlock the heavy iron doors leading to the massive subterranean basement, a space originally built as a bomb shelter during the Cold War. Down there, the scent of frankincense was completely replaced by the heavy stench of cigar smoke, cheap perfume, and stale whiskey. The Vance family ran the city's most lucrative illicit empire right out of the house of God. In the main underground hall, high-stakes poker tables were draped in green felt, lit by stolen church spotlights. In the back rooms, partitioned by heavy velvet curtains, a highly exclusive prostitution ring operated, catering to the city's corrupt politicians and judges. And in the old choir robe storage vault, millions of dollars in cartel drug money were counted, vacuum-sealed, and funneled directly into the church's tax-exempt bank accounts. Ezekiel Vance justified it all. "The Lord provides," he would whisper to Julian as they stacked bundles of $100 bills. "We use a fraction of this money to keep the church painted and the community fed. The state can't tax God's money, it's the perfect cover. But you cannot mock God forever without drawing a curse." It began on a rainy Thursday night. The basement was packed with high rollers, criminals, and ladies of the night. Julian was at the counting table, running stacks of cash through a bill counter, when the lights suddenly flickered. A cold, unnatural draft swept through the subterranean rooms, extinguishing the cigars and freezing the poker players mid-deal. Upstairs, in the empty sanctuary, the massive church pipe organ suddenly blared a single, deafening, discordant note. Ezekiel, who was pouring drinks at the basement bar, dropped his glass. It shattered on the concrete. "Julian, go see what the hell is wrong with the organ. The timer must be malfunctioning." Julian grabbed a flashlight and hurried up the narrow concrete steps. When he opened the door to the sanctuary, the air was freezing. His breath plumed in the darkness. The organ had stopped playing, but a low, rhythmic thumping sound echoed from the altar. He walked down the center aisle, his flashlight beam shaking. As he reached the pulpit, he gasped. The floorboards beneath the altar, the very ceiling of the illicit casino below, were bleeding. Thick, black, foul-smelling fluid was seeping through the wood, dripping down into the cracks. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the basement below. Julian bolted back down the stairs. When he burst into the underground casino, the scene was pure pandemonium. The illegal gamblers and prostitutes were scrambling for the exits, but the heavy iron doors had slammed shut, locking them in. In the center of the room, the concrete floor was cracking open. The money laundry tables had collapsed into a widening fissure. Out of the dark rift poured a swarm of thousands of scorpions and black bloated flies, but worse than the insects was the shadow that rose from the earth, a towering, formless mass of absolute darkness that smelled of rot, burning flesh, and ancient malice. "You built your den of thieves in my house." A chorus of agonizing voices echoed from the shadow, shattering the mirrors and glass bottles behind the bar. Clara Vance fell to her knees, screaming, clutching a Bible to her chest. The holy book instantly burst into green flames in her hands, burning her fingers to the bone. Ezekiel drew a gold-plated revolver from his waistband, his faith in his own power blinding him. "I am a man of God," he screamed, firing 3 shots into the darkness. The bullets simply dissolved into the shadow. The entity lunged forward. The darkness swept over the crowd like a tidal wave. The poker chips melted into liquid plastic. The vacuum-sealed bags of cash caught fire, filling the room with toxic, choking smoke. One by one, the patrons and the Vance family were dragged down into the yawning fissure, their screams swallowed by the roaring chaos of the underworld. When the sun rose on Friday morning, Mount Vernon Baptist Church stood completely silent. A delivery driver noticed the front doors were unlocked and walked inside. The sanctuary was pristine save for a faint smell of sulfur and smoke. The basement was later investigated, but police found no casino, no money, and no girls. There was only a hollow, empty concrete room, blackened by fire with 3 piles of gray ash sitting exactly where Ezekiel, Clara, and Julian Vance had stood, a permanent testament to the cost of running a syndicate in the sanctuary. The Sanctuary of Grace Fellowship was beautiful in the daylight, but under the cover of midnight, the towering stained glass windows became black, suffocating walls. Pastor Thomas stood at the altar, his fingers gripping the polished mahogany pulpit. Before him sat 50 members of his congregation, their faces pale under the flickering candlelight. They had answered his urgent late-night text chain without hesitation. They trusted him. He was their shepherd. But Thomas was no longer listening to the earthly world. 3 nights ago, a voice had pierced his sleep, a voice like grinding stones and burning sulfur. The revelation was absolute. The world was rotten, a grand harvest that was rapidly spoiling. To save his flock from the coming tribulation, Thomas had to offer them up as a pure, unblemished tithe. He had to wash the sanctuary in their blood to seal their souls for heaven. He truly, deeply believed he was doing the Lord's work. "My beloved," Thomas began, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, "we are gathered tonight not to preach, but to transcend. The world outside these doors is already dead. But you, my chosen few, will be saved tonight." A murmur of confusion rippled through the pews. Martha, an elderly deaconess who had known Thomas for a decade, leaned forward. "Pastor, what do you mean? Where are the choir boys? Why are the doors chained?" Thomas smiled, a serene, terrifying expression. "The doors are locked to keep the wilderness out, Martha. The sacrifice must be contained." Before anyone could process his words, 3 men stepped out from the shadows of the altar. They were the church trustees, their eyes glassy and vacant, completely under Thomas's fanatical spell. In their hands, they held heavy iron tire irons and hunting knives. "Let us pray," Thomas whispered. The first strike was sudden. A trustee brought an iron bar down across the head of a young man in the front row. The crack of bone echoed like a gunshot. Screams erupted instantly, tearing through the sacred silence of the holy house. People bolted from their pews, rushing toward the heavy oak exit doors only to find thick industrial chains wrapped around the handles. "Do not fight the deliverance," Thomas roared over the panic, his voice rising to an evangelical pitch. He stepped out from behind the pulpit, drawing a long silver ceremonial blade from beneath his white vestments. "The Lord demands a tithe of flesh. Purify your souls. Give unto God what is God's." The sanctuary turned into a slaughterhouse. The pews, once a place of comfort, became a labyrinth of terror. People tripped over cushions, scrambling frantically over one another as Thomas's radicalized inner circle hacked and slashed through the crowd. Thomas walked calmly through the chaos, a man possessed by holy purpose. He cornered a young mother hugging her sobbing child against the baptismal font. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Pastor, please, in God's name, stop." "I am doing this in His name, child." Thomas wept softly, his heart bursting with a twisted, ecstatic love. "He demands your purity. I am saving you from the fire." With a swift, practiced motion, he plunged the blade down. The water in the baptismal font turned a deep, violent crimson, overflowing onto the linoleum floor. For 20 minutes, the church echoed with the horrific sounds of a butchered flock. The screams slowly gave way to wet gasps, and eventually a heavy, suffocating silence. The air was thick with the copper stench of iron and the sweet aroma of melting wax. 50 souls lay scattered across the carpets, their eyes staring blankly at the crucifix above. The trustees stood amidst the carnage, chest heaving, covered from head to toe in red. They looked to Thomas for the final blessing. Thomas ascended the altar steps once more, his robes soaked, his hands trembling with spiritual exhaustion. He looked out at his quiet congregation, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. He had done it. He had delivered them all to the gates of paradise. "The harvest is complete," Thomas whispered, raising his bloody hands to the ceiling. "Receive them, Lord." Then he turned his gaze to his 3 loyal followers. The revelation had been explicit. No one could be left behind to taint the sacrifice. Thomas nodded to the main trustee, who calmly raised his knife and drove it into the throat of the man beside him. A final, brief struggle ensued until only Thomas and his head trustee remained. Thomas smiled warmly at the man. "Your reward in heaven will be great, brother." The trustee closed his eyes, tilting his head back willingly. Thomas drew the blade across the man's throat, watching him slump against the altar rail. Finally alone in the quiet house of God, Thomas knelt in the center of the aisle, surrounded by the bodies of the people he loved. He pressed the tip of the blade against his own chest, right over his beating heart. With a final, triumphant prayer, he pushed forward, eager to meet his Creator and receive his crown. Reverend David Sterling stood in the green room of the Tabernacle of Grace, adjusting his $4,000 silk tie in the mirror. Outside, the dull roar of 10,000 worshipers filled the megachurch stadium. The multi-million-dollar light show was warming up, and the smoke machines were filling the stage with a heavenly mist. David smiled. God was good, and business was booming. He had private jets to fund and a 3rd mansion to buy, all in the name of prosperity gospel. There was a soft knock on the door. "I said no interruptions before a broadcast," David snapped, not turning around. The door opened anyway, clicking shut with an unusual, heavy finality. Through the mirror, David saw a man sitting on the leather sofa in the corner. He hadn't heard him walk in. The man wore a faded denim jacket, dusty work boots, and had calloused hands resting on his knees. He looked entirely ordinary, yet there was a stillness about him that made the air in the room feel incredibly dense. "Who let you back here?" "Security." David reached for his intercom, but his fingers froze. The electronic device was completely dead, its lights extinguished. "They won't hear you, David," the man said. His voice wasn't loud, but it resonated deep inside David's chest, like the low hum of a massive thundercloud. David turned around, annoyed but attempting to maintain his charismatic stage persona. "Look, friend, if you need a handout or a prayer, you can see one of my prayer partners in the lobby. I have a global broadcast in 5 minutes." "You are going to broadcast a lie," the man said softly, looking around the luxurious room. "You sell miracles for seed money. You tell the poor to give you their rent money, so I will bless them. You have built an empire of glass on the backs of the brokenhearted." David's face flushed with anger. "How dare you? I am an anointed servant of God. I have brought millions to the faith." "You have brought millions to yourself," the man corrected, standing up. He didn't look threatening, but as he moved, the high-end LED lights in the green room began to flicker and die, leaving only a strange, ambient golden glow that seemed to emanate from the stranger himself. A sudden, primal fear gripped David's heart. Who are you?" The man walked over to the window, looking out at the massive stadium audience waiting for the show. "I am the one you claim to speak for. I have come to give you a choice, David. A final opportunity to save your own soul." David swallowed hard. Part of him wanted to laugh, to call this man a lunatic, but his soul recognized the authority in the room. His knees began to tremble. "If you are who you say you are, show me a sign. Perform a miracle. Prove it to me, and I'll change." The man turned his head, his eyes deep pools of infinite sorrow and ancient wisdom. "No. I will not strip away your free will with cosmic parlor tricks. If you only change because you see my true face, it is not repentance, it is fear. You must make this choice on your own free will and accord. Look at what you have done, David, and choose to be a shepherd again, not a wolf." The stranger stepped closer, extending a calloused hand. Cancel the broadcast tonight, walk out onto that stage, confess your greed to the people, and give away the millions you have stolen. Start over. Walk the narrow path. David looked at the man's hand, then looked at the television screen monitoring the stage. The countdown clock was at 60 seconds. 10,000 people were chanting his name. Millions more were watching at home, credit cards in hand, waiting to buy his latest book. If he confessed, he would lose everything. The mansions, the jet, the fame, the power. He would be ruined. He convinced himself this man was just a delusion, a test of his resolve by the devil to ruin his ministry. "No," David hissed, drawing himself up to his full height. "I am doing the Lord's work. Get out of my dressing room before I have you arrested." The stranger looked at David for a long, heartbreaking moment. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. "You had your choice, David, and you chose the gold over the glory." The man didn't vanish in a flash of light. He simply walked toward the exit door, and as his hand touched the doorknob, he muttered, "It is time to come home for your judgment." The door clicked shut. The stranger was gone. Instantly, the electronic lights snapped back on. The intercom buzzed to life. "Reverend Sterling, you're on in 5, 4, 3. David took a deep breath, shaking off the encounter. He forced a brilliant smile, grabbed his golden microphone, and stepped out into the blinding stage lights. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. David opened his mouth to deliver his opening pitch, but no sound came out. A sudden agonizing pain ripped through his chest. His heart seized violently. The golden microphone slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the stage floor. As the stadium erupted into chaotic screams, David fell to his knees, his vision fading to black. In his final conscious second, he realized the man hadn't been a delusion at all, and his eternal audit had just begun.